The level space station orbited the icy planet Venser for nearly 2 decades. A metallic cylinder filled with laboratories and hydroponic gardens, it was maintained by a team of scientists and technicians working in 3-year shifts. No one knew precisely why the Galactic Union had chosen this remote location for a research base, but rumors spoke of gravitational anomalies detected in Venser's upper atmosphere, distortions that defied known physics. Commander Jorge Paul, a man with broad shoulders, always keeping an eye on the data screens, would repeat in meetings, "The truth lies in the silence of the numbers." It wasn't an explanation, but no one dared question it. In the early hours of Cycle 347, systems technician Megan Chen awoke to the Delta Section's pressure alarm flashing red. Arriving there, she found the control panel melted into organic shapes, as if the metal had been digested by something alive. Her communicator emitted static, and within the static, a voice whispered her name in 3 dead languages. She recoiled, but the corridor behind her was no longer a corridor. The walls twisted into spirals, and the floor seemed to breathe. When she returned to the infirmary, her hands were covered in pulsating black veins, synchronized with the alarm. Biologist Edgar Nader, an expert in extraterrestrial ecology, was the first to suggest the station wasn't alone. He analyzed samples of Venser's soil and found microorganisms that didn't follow conventional DNA structures. "They are neither alive nor dead," he said, projecting holographic images of molecular chains rearranging into fractal patterns. "They are waiting." Commander Paul ordered the samples destroyed, but Edgar kept a capsule in his uniform pocket. That night, he dreamt of a city submerged in a waterless ocean, where creatures with light teeth whispered equations into his ear. The supply ship Cyrene arrived 6 months late. The level crew awaited food, replacement parts, and news from Earth, but what they found were bodies floating in the cargo bay, preserved in a gelatinous substance that smelled of ozone. Cyrene's log showed the ship had passed through the same sectors as Level, but in a different timeline, dates that didn't coincide with the standard calendar. The station psychologist, Dr. Nader, noticed that all the Cyrene crew had their eyes sewn shut with threads of an unknown metallic alloy. When she tried to remove one of the threads, the corpse's skin dissolved into silvery dust. Gradually, Level's reality began to unravel. Lights flickered in codes no one had programmed. The hydroponic gardens produced fruit with teeth, and the corridors stretched beyond their original design length. Megan Chen began conversing with an entity she called the Architect, a presence claiming to have built the station before humanity even existed. "You are merely an echo," the voice in her skull said, as she drew diagrams on the walls with her own blood. Edgar Nader, now with black tentacles sprouting from his neck, laughed and said she was right. Commander Paul decided to send an emergency signal, but all frequencies were answered by a single transmission. A child reciting prime numbers in descending order, starting with 8999. Dr. Nader, in her last lucid moments, realized the numbers corresponded to the coordinates of Venkop, but reversed. When the crew gathered in the bridge to discuss the next step, they saw that the planet below was no longer a sphere. It was an eye with pupils made of rings of ancient satellites. In the last entry of the ship's log, recorded in audio by a voice not belonging to any crew member, it was heard, "The station did not disappear. It was remembered." Biologist Edgar Nader awoke with his mouth full of roots. They weren't plant roots, but something viscous and translucent that coiled around his teeth, like cosmic threads. He spat, but the filaments clung to the cabin wall, pulsing with violet hues. His neck itched where the tentacles had sprouted days before, now long enough to reach the ceiling. They weren't part of him, he realized. They were translators. Every touch on a control panel or organic surface of the station transmitted sensations that his brain converted into words: hunger, memory. In the communications room, Megan Chen argued with emptiness. The architect revealed that Level wasn't a station, but a body, a dormant organism using the crew as antibodies to fight an infection. "The infection is us," she said to the corpse of an engineer whose skin had become a vibrating membrane reproducing radio static. Edgar tried to warn her about the Venkop microbes, but his words came out distorted, as if his tongue were made of dry ice. Commander Paul ordered an evacuation, but the transports were linked to the station's nervous system. Trying to activate them, the crew saw their reflections in the steel doors, not as they were, but as they would be 1,000 years from now. Skeletons wrapped in translucent flesh orbiting a dead star. Dr. Nader, now with spiraling pupils, suggested accepting the transformation. "It's not parasitism," she argued, injecting a sample of the Cyrene fluid into herself. It's symbiosis. We become part of something greater. Level's corridors began to bleed, not blood, but a mercury-like substance forming pools with human faces. Edgar, guided by the whispers of his tentacles, discovered a hidden chamber behind the fusion reactor. Inside, holograms of extinct civilizations repeated in a loop. Children building cities, scientists dissecting tentacled creatures, crowds shouting to gods that never answered. In the center, floating in a tank of amniotic fluid, was the body of a man covered in mathematical symbols. Symbols Edgar recognized from his dreams. Megan decided to confront the architect. She disabled the security systems and walked to the station's core, where the reactor had been replaced by a pulsating mass of veins and teeth. "You are not a god," she said, as the walls projected scenes of her childhood on Mars. "You are a corpse." The entity responded with electrical sparks. "You killed me first. With your wars, your silence. Now I will be reborn." In the bridge, Paul finally understood. The gravitational anomalies, the Cyrene bodies, the transformations, it was all a birth. Level wasn't disappearing from the galaxy. It was being born into another. He ordered the crew to assemble in the hangar, but only half appeared. The others had merged with the walls or transformed into crystal statues repeating phrases in invented languages. As the last door sealed, the eye-planet below blinked, and the darkness between the stars began to move like a swarm of wasps. Edgar, whose tentacles now wrote prophecies in the air, whispered, "It's not the end. It's the first mistake." Commander Paul pressed the ship's log against his chest as the bridge floor melted into a pool of amniotic fluid. The faces of the dead crew floated on the surface, smiling with teeth made of stars. He tried to send a final report, but the voice that came from the communicator wasn't his. It was a chorus of children reciting reversed coordinates. Megan Chen, now with black veins covering 73% of her body, crawled towards him and whispered, "Don't resist. The pain is just the nervous system trying to understand the truth." Her eyes, once brown, transformed into quartz spheres, projecting images of a war between entities using galaxies as weapons. Edgar Nader, or what remained of him, merged with the station's core. His tentacles enveloped the pulsating reactor, and he understood that the Venser microorganisms weren't life, but memory, records of a civilization that committed collective suicide to contain a temporal virus. "We are the cure," he thought, as his skull opened into translucent petals, revealing a brain that shone like a black hole. Dr. Nader, now a crystal statue bleeding ultraviolet light, laughed, "Cure or symptom?" The darkness between the stars swallowed Level. It wasn't destruction, but translation. The station's walls disintegrated into dancing particles, following an inaudible melody, and each crew member saw their birth and death simultaneously. The eye-planet below closed its eyelid, and for a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. When the light returned, there were no bodies or metal, only a perfect void, as if the station had never existed. On an unknown beach, whose sand sang to the touch, a faceless man wrote in the sand with a bony finger, "Mistake corrected." The tide, made of amniotic fluid and human teeth, erased the words. In another reality, a child looked at the sky and asked, "Why do the stars tremble?" His mother, with black veins on her hands, replied, "They are learning to forget."